All right. Chicago SABR is thrilled tonight to welcome Ed Lynch, former pitcher for the Mets and Cubs, GM for the Cubs, and a scout for both the Cubs and the Blue Jays. Ed, thanks for joining us tonight. From where? You're in Arizona?
I'm in Scottsdale, Arizona. I'm sorry to
All
tell
right.
you, but it was like 68 degrees today. So I think our wind chill is about 60 degrees. So I'm really sorry about that.
No, that's okay. Yeah,
No
it's
problem.
supposed to be 5 or 6 degrees overnight here, so
Ouch.
that's fine. We'll be just dreaming of Arizona tonight. So, just kind of thinking about your life in baseball, starting with whenever you started playing as a kid up and through high school. Did you have a sense at some point that you might have been good enough to be a professional to make it to the major leagues?
No, no, none whatsoever. I was always the youngest kid in my class and the tallest. So I had a brother that was like 19 months older than me, so who was a great player in Little League. I mean, he threw no hitters every game. I used to catch him. And his name was Chris. So, my dad would go to the coaches, if you want Christopher, you got to take Edward. And they're like, oh, okay, we'll take Christopher. And I played right field, I was, so no, not really. I always had a good arm though. I mean, I always could throw. Back then we threw everything. We threw baseballs, footballs, rocks, bottles, you name it. We threw everything. And we're outside all the time. And when I got to high school, my junior year in high school, I was only 15, well, until February 25th. So I just turned 16. And my coach said the only way you're going to make this team is if you catch, because the catcher got hurt. So I caught every game my junior year in high school, didn't throw one inning. And my brother was the star pitcher, so I caught him. And then my senior in high school, I was probably one of the better pitchers in the state. I grew, got bigger and stronger, but basketball was my sport. I mean, it was basketball, baseball. That was the two sports. And it worked out pretty good. The only thing in Florida is, the basketball season goes until the end of February, and the baseball team has already played 15 games. It's that thing because of warm weather. So, my senior in high school, I did really well. And then I didn't get drafted by anybody. I didn't get recruited by anybody because they knew I was going to go to college and play basketball. So I wound up going to the University of South Carolina on a basketball scholarship. Frank McGuire was the head coach there. Donnie Walsh was the assistant. I played with guys like Alex English, NBA Hall of Famer, Mike Dunleavy, who coached the Lakers, who played in the NBA a long time. Brian Winters, who was a first round pick of the Lakers, got traded to the Bucks him and seven other guys got traded to the Bucks for Lou Alcindor. Can you guys still see me?
Yeah, I was just starting the PowerPoint as
Oh,
you were
okay,
talking
that's
about
fine.
this.
Boy, you
Sorry to
really are
interrupt
going
you.
to fact check me, huh? Um, yeah, boy, there's a picture of me when I was a little Ichabod Crane look there. But yeah, we went in college. My first 2 years, I didn't even pitch. I pitched like one inning my freshman year, like two innings my sophomore year, and then everybody graduated. And then I was like 10-1 my junior year and didn't get drafted. And I didn't find out for 20 years why I didn't get drafted is because I wasn't old enough. I was 20 years old. You had to be 21 to be drafted out of college as a junior. And then I went back for my senior year and in 77 and got off to a great start, then hurt my arm really bad and hurt my shoulder. And I never threw the same way again. And wound up getting drafted in the 22nd round by the Texas Rangers, went to rookie ball, did okay in rookie ball. And then, I remember sitting with my dad and saying, if I get released, I'm going to go into the IBM training program. My dad was with IBM for several years. And then I got a contract in the mail. And, I really worked hard that winter of 77 going into 78. And then in 78, I went to A ball, did really well. Went to double A, did very, very well in double A. And then the next year in 1979, I made the triple A team, went to Tucson, Arizona. I thought I pitched really well in tough conditions. I think I was 10-11 with a 5 ERA. And those conditions out there in the West, the ball flies, the ground's hard. And And then after the season, I'm sitting in my parents' house, and Joe Klein was a minor league director. And I answered the phone. It's him. And he goes, Ed, we made a trade with the Mets. And I'm thinking, why is he telling me this? Why is he telling me this stuff? I went, oh, it's me. So I got traded to the Mets, went to spring training in 1980, went to AAA in 1980 with the Tidewater Tides, had a really good year. I was 13-6, I believe. And got called up to the big leagues, and then pitched a couple of really good games, a couple of not so good games. Then in 81, I did not make the team, but Craig Swan got hurt. I came up to the big leagues, pitched pretty good, okay, and then the strike hit. They sent me down a few days before the strike, and I was really upset about it at the time, but it turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me because I pitched every fifth day in AAA during the strike. So for 55, 56 days, the big leaguers were sitting at home doing nothing, and I was pitching. And then when the strike ended, remember they had that all-star game in Cleveland. I was watching the game in the clubhouse in Columbus, Ohio. I remember Gary Carter hit 2 home runs, but my manager, Jack Aker, came up to me and said I was going to the big leagues. So I went to the big leagues and never went back. And I remember coming up to the big leagues, and I'm facing, my first start was at Wrigley Field, and I'm facing Bill Madlock. And I throw him well, he probably wasn't there. I was facing Bill Buckner. And I just threw one of my average fastballs, lowered away, and he hit a rocket into the third base dugout, and the light bulb went off. These guys haven't seen live pitching in almost 2 months. So I could always command my fastball. And John Stearns was a catcher, God rest his soul, and he was great. He just gave me that target low and away. And I just kept throwing it out there, and I pitched really well the rest of 81, and then made the team in 82. And I was with the Mets 82, 3, 4, 5. And then on June 30th of 86, I got traded to the Cubs. Went from the old saying, first to worst. Mets wound up winning the World Series that year. But, you know, I knew it was a business. For me to get upset at something like that would be showing that I'm pretty naive about the industry. How dare you trade Ed Lynch? I mean, who the hell's Ed Lynch, you know? And I remember the last pitcher on that Met staff, one of the greatest staffs of the second half of the 20th century, and the 10th pitcher on the team, 11th pitcher, was Rick Aguilera. So I knew I wasn't coming back from the end of my rehab assignment. So I was just waiting to see where I was going to go. So it was pretty, it was tough, you know, but I understood. And when I was interviewing for the general manager's job, Andy McPhail said he was looking for someone with a Cub connection. So maybe that the fact that I pitched there is one of the reasons I got the GM job. So I've come to terms with it, and it's the nature of the game.
Yeah, and so with the Tides, you were reunited with Mookie Wilson, who was on
Yes,
the University of South Carolina team with you, right?
that's right. We played together in college. We played together in the minor leagues. And the thing about Mookie is that, you know, he was a right-handed hitter all the way through college, all the way through the minor leagues until 1980 in AAA. And then they made him a switch hitter. And, you know, the thing about being a switch hitter, you know, 99% of switch hitters are natural right-handed hitters. So now all of a sudden you're getting 80% of your at-bats from the weak side of the plate. You know, it could be a traumatic thing. You know, now you're hitting left-handed for the first time in your life, and you're doing it 80% of your at-bats because you're facing all right-handed. And Mookie picked it up perfectly. I remember he hit about a 420-foot home run on opening day hitting left-handed, and he never looked back. I mean, Mookie was an incredible athlete, strong, good hand-eye coordination, great bat speed. So yeah, Mookie and I played in college, in the minor leagues, and in the big leagues.
So when you came up for your September call-up, your first start was against the Cubs at Shea.
Yeah, well, my first appearance was in San Francisco. I think it was one of my first. I had very few relief appearances in the minor leagues, and I came in relief and gave up 4 runs, gave up a triple to Al Holland, the pitcher on the other team, and I pitched terrible, and we were terrible, and I didn't pitch for the next 13 days, and we lost 13 games in a row. Finally, after about 10 days, I went to Joe Torre. I said, Joe, am I ever going to pitch again? And he said, "You're pitching Saturday against the Cubs." That was Saturday, September 13th, 1980. And I won the game. I pitched 6 innings, and Joe got me out of there, and I won the game. And that was one of the, it was a great thrill for me. I actually got a base hit too.
Your first
off
major
of
league
Lynn,
hit was in the 4th inning that game.
off of Lynn McLaughlin. And I remember I went down to first base, and Bill Buckner was on first base, and he said, "You want me to get the ball?" And I look over, the pitcher's glaring at me, and I said, "No, that's okay." He goes, "I'll tell you what, there were 2 outs." He goes, if I'll throw it in your dugout if I get the ball. Next pitch, guy fouled it straight back. So I never got the ball. Didn't care about that. But getting that first win, my parents were there. That was one of the better days of my career.
That's awesome. And the story that I found that I had the biggest question about was about this gigantic stereo that you had that didn't even fit
Oh,
in the
boombox,
locker.
man. Who didn't have a boombox? I didn't carry it on my shoulder walking down the street, but yeah, this guy came in the clubhouse in Tidewater, and he was selling boom boxes, discounted boom boxes. So I bought one for like $20. Yeah, I don't remember that. I
It
didn't
was
remember carrying a monstrous piece of apparatus around, and it didn't barely fit in my locker. I've never seen that before. Hey, those things were all the rage back then.
Was it lighthearted in the locker room then after breaking a, a losing streak like that?
Yeah, it
Celebrate?
was. I remember.
Yeah,
I remember Joe gave me the lineup card. He signed the lineup card and gave it to me. I still have it. One of my very valued possessions. Yeah, but like it was a bad club, and you can tell bad clubs when you're in the clubhouse. I mean, I was there before anybody. I mean, I came up in San Francisco the next couple of days. Mookie came up, Wally came up, Mike Scott came back up. So I had, by the time I was traded, I had more consecutive service there than anybody. And I saw that club go from a horrible club with players with not so great attitudes. I'm not going to name anybody, but when you're on a bad ball club, you lose a tough game, 6-5, give up 2 in the ninth, you lose. It's like, gee, tough loss. Hey, where are we eating tonight? And when you get on good clubs, and I saw it change, and the biggest change in our club, in that clubhouse, was Keith Hernandez when he came over. I mean, here's a guy that was the best player on the defending world champion, and he gets traded by the middle of June the following year. They're defending world champions, and this guy gets traded to a last place team. I couldn't believe it. We got him for what it was Rick Omby and Neil Allen. I think Whitey just wanted to move him, but he came over, and at first I could tell he was just feeling his way. He didn't really say much, and we could tell he was a great player. I faced him enough. I was just glad I didn't have to face him anymore. But he was deciding if he was going to stay. I think his contract was up, and Frank Cashin really put the full court press on in the offseason to sign him. Wound up signing to a 5-year deal, and I think Keith could see the people we had coming. Because Strawberry had come up, Ron Darling had come up, and Keith liked the New York. He was a New York guy. Some guys cannot play in New York. Keith flourished in New York. He really loved the attention. He loved the pressure. He was a big time player, big time leader. So now when 84 comes around, we lose a tough game. It wasn't like, hey, we gave it our best shot. It was like somebody slapped your mother. I mean, it was very uneasy. It was very, I mean, people were walking around on eggshells when we lost the game. No music or anything like that. I mean, it was like, hey, now we're getting down to business. And the Mets did a super job in those years building their squad through, there's 3 ways to build a club: free agency, the draft, and trades. And, they did it the right way. I mean, the one big free agent signing they had was George Foster, and that just did not work. But the draft, if you look at the players they drafted, the Darryl Strawberries and the Dwight Goodens and the Lenny Dykstras, and in the trades, they got Ron Darling and Keith Hernandez, and we got Walt Terrell, who turned into Howard Johnson. And so the draft and trades, the Mets did it as well or better than anybody in baseball in that period of time, and that's because of Joe McIlvain and Frank Cashin. You know, they knew players, they knew what it took to pitch and play in New York, and they got those kind of players, real tough guys.
Now, you grew up in Florida, but you were born in New York, in
Yeah, I was
Brooklyn?
born in Brooklyn. My dad worked for IBM, as I said. I don't remember Brooklyn. We left there when I was 2. We went to Westchester County and Dutchess County. And then when I was 12 years old, he became chief financial officer of Eastern Airlines. You guys are old enough, some of you, to remember Eastern Airlines. And we moved to Miami, Florida when I started 8th grade. And wasn't real happy at the time because I was a Met fan, a Knick fan, and a Jet fan. They all won the World's Championship the next year while I'm sitting in Miami with no ESPN and no internet. So, but it was turned out to be one of the better things that happened to me in my life because, you know, the weather, I was outdoors all the time. You know, could throw in the winter, could, you know, do what I wanted year round and not worry about the cold weather. So, yeah, I went to Christopher Columbus High School in Miami, who was that school has recently turned into a major basketball powerhouse. I think they finished second in the country last year. They had the Boozer brothers, who are both going to Duke. They recruit there now. It's an all boys Catholic school. So I had a good high school career. Had a good time in high school. I was like the youngest guy, you know, in my class by a year at least. I was 16 my senior year until February 25th. So didn't really do well with the chicks. You know, I was kind of gangly. Had braces my junior year or sophomore year. So anyway, turned out okay, I guess.
Was it cool to play for the team you grew up rooting for, your
Oh,
childhood team?
absolutely. You know, it was like destiny. I couldn't believe it when they said I got traded to the Mets. And, you know, I learned this. I never had this problem because I used to do this. I used to talk to young players all the time. They get traded and they're like, oh, you guys don't want me anymore. It's like, no, the team you're going to wants you. You know, they like you, they believe in you, and they're going to push you along to make the trade look good. It's the best thing that ever happened to you. And they go, geez, I never thought of that. So, well, when I got the call I was going to the Mets, it was like a childhood dream come true. I mean, I went to Shea Stadium in '64, saw a lot of games then when it was brand new stadium. And Tom Seaver was my idol. Got to pitch with him later on. So yeah, I was thrilled. And first time I put on that Met uniform was pretty special for me.
So in the same regard as going over to the Cubs, who for some of the younger people, my kids don't have any concept of the Cubs and Mets being rivals in the NL East. That never existed. But
Yeah, that's right.
was going to the Mets or going from the Mets to the Cubs something that you thought, well, it's a major league job, or are you thinking, oh, I don't really like the Cubs all that much?
Well, I was devastated, but I understood it. But you know, the Mets and Cubs had a rivalry, but it was kind of like, hey, how you guys doing? Hey, good luck. Hey, good game. Blah blah blah. It was a friendly rivalry. Our rivalry with the Cardinals was pure, unadulterated hatred. I mean, we hated each other. We almost had a bunch of fight. A lot of it was because Keith came over. You know, him and Whitey were at odds. Um, they we trained with them in spring training. We played them in B games 4 days a week. We are sick of looking at them. And we got good. At 82, we were bad. 83, we were bad. 84, we got good, but the Cubs got good at the same time and beat us then. 85, we won 98 games. The Cardinals won 101, I think. And then 86, the Mets blew them out early and it was over. But yeah, that rivalry between us and the Cardinals was pure vitriol.
And how was it having basically a front row seat for Dwight Gooden as the phenom as he comes up?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, ironically, he threw in 1983, you can look it up. He pitched, I think, 191 innings and struck out 300 for, he was an A-ball, finished year in AAA. I think he was 19-4 as an 18-year-old kid, threw 191 innings, struck out 300. But ironically, he played one game in Shea Stadium that year. They came up and played the Padres affiliate. I just talked to Dwight about this at the fantasy camp, and he pitched. And I used to talk to Joe McElvain, and I paid attention to what was going on, and I knew he was coming. And so Sam Perlazzo was the manager, and they played it like maybe 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and we had a night game that night. There's like 25 people in the stands. Dwight Gooden's pitching. A year later there would have been 52,000, but he's pitching. And I remember he struck out like 14, but a guy hit a home run off of late in the game to beat him like 2-1. And I talked to him after the game, and he was upset and everything. I said, "Oh, you're going to be just fine." And then in spring training the next year, the Mets weren't going to keep him. Davey Johnson told me that he was under instructions, and Joe McElvain just told me down in Florida when I was down there. It was, he needs to go to AAA. He needs to go to AAA. So he's going out there facing major league hitters, and he's coming in later in the game. And by the time he gets in there, he's facing AAA guys, and he's blowing these guys away like it's Little League. And then they give him a start against a pretty good club. And again, he just totally overmatched them. I mean, 5 innings. I mean, literally 10 strikeouts, things like that you just didn't see happen, not with a 19-year-old. So finally, Joe told me this. Davey Johnson was in there every day. He's on my staff. He's on my staff. He's on my staff. Finally, Frank said, "Okay, I'll tell you what. Pitch him somewhere that's really tough. And if he does well, you can keep him." So the place where nobody wanted to pitch in those years was Fort Lauderdale. Number one, the Yankees were really good. And number two, the wind blew out every day you pitched there. I mean, it was gusting out. And he went down there and he shoved the bats up their ass like it was a ball. I couldn't believe it. I mean, he punched out their top guys looking. You strike out a hitter looking, you got pretty good stuff. And he had number 64 that game. And then it was a Sunday. We had Monday off. And then Tuesday, he runs out onto the field. He's got number 16. And we knew he had made it. And justifiably so. But his first start was in Houston. He was nervous as hell. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago. When you're afraid, you kind of overthrow. And he was overthrowing a little bit. And I think that's one of the hardest I've ever seen a human being throw a baseball in my life. The guns back then were a lot slower. As you guys knows, they registered like right in front of the plate. And as time went on, they'd register closer. And now it's right out of the hand. So guys are throwing 100 now. On the gun in 1984 would have been like 94, something like that, 95. And I bet you Dwight on today's gun was throwing over 100 miles an hour. He pitched 5 innings, and then they got him out of there. He got the win. And from then on, it was something to watch. And even 1984, I think he punched out like 280 guys. I think he was 17-6 with a 2.7 or something like that. And he punched out 280 guys as a 19-year-old. And then the next year he comes back 20-year-old. He just overmatched the league from day one. And I had the privilege of throwing after him a bunch of times. So I used to sit at the end of the dugout and chart his games. Back then we charted games from the dugout. And he was easy to chart. It was just hard gas and a hard hammer. It was either fastball, curveball. Some guys you can't tell what they're throwing. But I used to chart games, and he would strike out guys looking that I wouldn't dream of striking out swinging. And they would just walk away. They'd walk away knowing they were totally overmatched. And that year he was something. And the one game that really comes to mind is we went into Chicago. It was in July or August. I think it was August. And the wind was blowing out really hard. And he went out there and just started throwing really hard sinkers and his hard curveball to adapt to the conditions. And, he didn't have his normal game punching out 14. He might have punched out less, got a lot of ground balls. And after the game, I said to Mel Stottlemyre, I said, "You ever seen anything like that before in your life?" He goes, "Never. I've never seen a guy do that." So he went from being a cross seam, high fastball, downer curve guy to 2-seam and sinkers. And, it was an incredible thing. And that was an incredible year. And people ask me, it's funny when Kerry Wood struck out 20 guys in May of 98 after the game, I talked to a couple of writers and they said, "Is he the greatest 20-year-old pitcher you've ever seen?" I went, "Well, not really." And they were stunned. I said, "Dwight Gooden, remember him?" And he was amazing for a 20-year-old to do that. It'll never happen again. They'll never let a 20-year-old throw 250 innings in back-to-back years again. It'll never happen again.
So if you're talking about modern radar guns, where's your fastball sitting now if you're pitching in 2024?
I was a below average. I had a below average fastball, but I had a good slider, good changeup. If an average major league fastball right now is 92 miles an hour, I probably threw 88, 89, 3 or 4 miles an hour underneath. But I never, if I pitched a game and threw 100 pitches, I might throw 3 or 4 pitches as hard as I can, max effort. Because our goal back then was, we were judged on whether we got them out or not. Now you're judged on, velocity, strikeouts per 9, spin rate. It was, I didn't try to strike people out unless I had to try to strike people out. So in my day, it was work fast, pitch to contact, let your infielders work for you. So I did. I remember Joe Torre, when I came up to the big leagues, he said, go out there and throw fastballs low and away until you have to throw something else. So there'd be games I would throw nothing but fastballs for 3 innings through the lineup. And they might hit a rocket at the center fielder, a bullet ground ball, but if it was an out, I just keep throwing them. Now I go to a game, and I swear to God, when I scouted 16 years, I scouted for the Cubs also, besides Toronto. Did I say? Yeah, you guys said Toronto. But I sat there for 16 years and watched pitchers, and I saw it evolve to the point where I went to a lot of big league games, and I saw the pitcher with 4 pitches throw every single pitch he had to the leadoff hitter in the game. So he's going up there, and he's coming back, and they say, what do you say? Well, his curveball's this, his changeup's that, his slider's this, his fastball does that. He's seen everything you have. So back then, the plan was first time through the lineup, throw fastballs until you have to throw a breaking ball. If the bases are loaded and there's 2 outs, that all fastball shit's right out the window. So, you threw fastballs until you had to throw something else first time through. Second time through, I start them off with a breaking ball, the real good hitters, and I'd mix it up and pitch this. And then the rest of the game was pitching solely to the situation. If you're up 10-0 in the 7th inning, you're throwing nothing like you're pitching in the 1st inning. You're throwing nothing but fastballs. I don't give a shit if I give up 3 runs and go 9 innings and give the bullpen a night off. I did that a few times. And in 1985, I had 6 complete games. I remember coming in, it's 11-1, and Davey goes, "Can you finish?" I said, "Yeah, sure." So the final score would be 11-4, 11-5. I didn't give a shit. I got the win. The win is what we wanted. The qualitative stats didn't mean much like they do now. Everything's qualitative, meaning strikeouts per 9, ERA. They don't care about walks. And the pitches, the velocity, spin rate. Back then, you were judged on how you did. Did you win the game? Wins were the most valuable commodity for me.
And so you talked a little bit about the trade then from the Mets to the Cubs in '86. You started with the Mets that year. You had 1 appearance and then had an injury. Is that what happened?
Well, I had the injury when I pitched. I was in spring training that year, and I threw a pitch, and Chris Pitaro hit a swinging bunt, and I twisted, and I felt something pop in my left knee. That was the last week of spring training, and I wasn't going on the DL. I mean, I needed to pitch, and so we went in the first road trip. I think we went to Pittsburgh and then went to Philadelphia, and I pitched like 2 1/3 innings, pitched good. And the next day I woke up, my knee was the size of a basketball. And then the doctor said, no, we gotta do surgery on this. So I had surgery probably around May 1st, rehab with the team, May and June. And then in the middle of June, I went down on a 15-day rehab to Tidewater. And then when my 15 days was up June 30th, that's when I got traded to the Cubs.
Yeah, and so this is the card from '87 Topps.
Yeah.
And at some point, Ed, I met you at a Cubs convention a long time ago, and you signed this card for me. Thank you. But you looked at this picture and you just went, "That is the worst picture of me."
I know. I think I told the photographer to F himself, and he got revenge. I always sign right over that triple chin I got working there. So Yeah, he got me. That's all right.
But kind of reading a little bit about your coming over to the Cubs, you didn't mince your words initially about being traded. You alluded to the first to worst, and you said, and I didn't get this one in time, but you said, I could see now that I'm sitting in the other dugout why the other teams don't like them, meaning the Mets. The Mets are a
Yeah.
little cocky, maybe a lot cocky, but they're also good. And if they were doing what they're doing in Milwaukee instead of where they are, nobody would be talking about
Well, yeah. I mean, is it true? I don't know. I mean,
it. Yeah,
Milwaukee's one of the smallest markets. New York, everything's magnified, and they were good. And there's an old saying: "There's no such thing as hate. There's only envy." And when you're in the National League, and every single game of the week is the Mets playing somebody every Saturday, and then every Monday night ABC Monday Night Baseball is the Mets playing somebody. After a while, people start hating you. And that we had flair, and we had guys that were cocky as hell. I mean, Lenny Dykstra would walk out there like he's freaking Tris Speaker, and Keith was Keith, and Straw. He used to style a little bit, but they were good and they knew it, you know. And but I love the guys. My teammates on the Cubs were great. I'm still close friends with a lot of them. I did fantasy camp every year with guys like Jody Davis and Ryne Sandberg and you know Keith Moreland, uh, Bull Durham, Leon Durham, Bobby Dernier, Gary Matthews. I would like to say one thing about Ryne Sandberg. I saw something on the internet today that his cancer has resurfaced. So we're all praying for Rhino. Great player, great teammate. It's we're just hoping that everything turns out well.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, so coming over to the Cubs, in your second start, I'm always a big fan of infographics, and you helped turn a triple play. Do you
That's
remember
right.
this?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
First and third, Mike Aldretti's the hitter, and whenever we played San Francisco, St. Louis, they never tried to steal on me because I was really quick to the plate. But they hit and run every frickin' pitch because I didn't strike anybody out. I threw a lot of strikes. So they would hit and run all the time. And I remember, I'd be throwing a pitch, there he goes. So Mike Aldretti's up, and it's first and third. Of course, there's nobody out. I'm like, oh man. And so I throw a pitch and I hear, there he goes. And so in my mind, I realize the guy on first is probably already to second, and he hits a bullet right at my face. And I stick my glove up and catch it. And I just turned to third, and the hitter had taken a couple of crow hops down the line. I remember Davey Lopes was playing third base, and I threw it over there hard, figuring if I didn't get him, they're still going to get the guy at first because he's staying on second. And it was bang bang play at third. They called him out, and then they threw over to first for the triple play. So that's pretty cool when you're in a jam and 12 seconds later you're out of it. By the way, it was Budweiser play of the day, so that was the only one in my career. So I didn't get shit from Budweiser either. So
very nice. Yeah, and then it looks like in August, on the 10th, shut out Philly at Wrigley Field. Um, and then you're quoted saying that you felt 100% physically. The sciatica problem was gone, your knee was feeling better, and basically the rest of that season you did fantastic. 7-5 with a 3.79 ERA, almost
yeah,
100 innings pitched, just a third of an inning short of 100 that year for the Cubs. So going into 1987, what was the plan? Just kind of the same thing?
yeah. I wanted to be a starter, and they put me in the bullpen, and then my knee started bothering me again, and I just my body started to fall apart. I don't know why. I mean, I pitched that year. I pitched. I think I was in 58 games. I think I pitched like 110 innings, um, which was a load. I mean, I remember pitching 3 days in a row a few times. And then my body just started breaking down as my knee and then my sciatica came back. And then my arm just dead. By the end of that year, I was pretty much done, you know. Then I went to spring training in '88 with the Red Sox and pitched okay. Didn't make the club. Went home to Miami. Wound up pitching one game for the Giants, record-setting game. I pitched for the Firebirds in Colorado Springs. I think I pitched 2 1/3, gave up 15 earned runs, and I went directly from the mound to the clubhouse to the airport and went home, and I was done. And started law school like 2.5 months after that. So things transitioned pretty quickly.
Was that always the plan? Were you thinking about law school the whole time?
No, I really wasn't. I got home, I was 32 years old, and I'd say, well, how am I going to differentiate myself from every other 32-year-old who's been out there working in the real world for 10 years? And where have I been? Running around in the field, But my brother, who at the time we had been practicing law for 10 years very successfully and very smart guy. And he said, why don't you go to Miami Law School? And I'll tell you a funny story about that. The summer of, I started in August of '88. So the summer of '88, in between retiring and my first day of class, I went up to New York. Joe McIlvaine said, come on up. I went up in late in the year. I went up in the end of August. Was that eight? Yeah. No, it was in August. No, excuse me. This is 1989. All right. 1989. I'm finishing my second year, getting ready to go into my third year. And I was going to graduate early because I went to summer school in the summer. So my class graduated in May of '91. I graduated in December of '90. So in late August of 1989, Joe McIlvaine says, come on up and, I'll get your interviews with both league presidents and the commissioner. And I went, oh, okay. I'll do that. Because I was going to try to get a job in baseball. And if it didn't work out, I was going to go to law school. I've already made that decision. I'm already in law school. So if I don't get a job in baseball, I'm just going to try to be a civil litigator. I thought I'd be pretty good at that. So I interviewed with Gene Budig and the black guy that played for the Cardinals. I'm drawing a blank. Was the president of the National League. I'll think of his name. And I interviewed with Bill White. Bill White. Sorry, Bill. God rest your soul. But yeah, I talked to those two guys, and then I went into the commissioner's office. And I'll tell you, his face was like gray. I mean, this guy, and it's the first time I've ever seen anybody be a true chain smoker. I mean, this guy was lighting one with the one he was just smoking. And I sat down, and, he was a linguist professor at Yale. And I sat down. The first thing he asked me, he goes, what's the saying? Where's the saying can of corn come from? And I said, well, in the grocery stores, a can of corn be on the top shelf. The guy would knock it off the shelf. It was an easy catch for him. So the next question, he goes, what's worse, horse shit or brutal? And I said, brutal's worse than horse shit. And I said, there's only one thing worse than brutal. He goes, what's that? And I said, fucking brutal, like all the umpires. And he laughed. He thought that was funny as hell. Excuse my language. You can blurt that out if you want. Yeah, so I talked to him for an hour and a half, and we just had a great time. And this is right in the depths of the Pete Rose thing. And I've kind of changed my mind since that day. But he said to me before, he goes, one last question. I thought he was going to ask me about some other saying. He goes, if you were me, what would you do with Pete Rose? And I said, Commissioner, I would hang him from the highest yard arm. And he said, good answer. And that was the last. And then I went home, and 5 days later, he dropped dead on Labor Day. I think he was in Martha's Vineyard. And he was a young man. He was probably in his early 50s. So that's one thing I really remember. And then I went on to graduate. And in my last semester was the fall of 1990. I'm going to graduate in December of 1990. And I got a call from Joe McIlvaine. Joe had just become the general manager of the San Diego Padres. And I've been talking to him now for 3 years. And he says, would you be interested in being a director of player development? And I said, absolutely. He says, I'll call you right after the World Series. So now I'm rooting for a sweep. I'm like, God, the A's are going to sweep the Reds. And I'll hear back right away. And the Reds turned out they swept the A's. So Joe calls me, I take the job, and I was hired by the Padres probably around November 1st, and started getting paid. And I went to the winter meetings in Chicago. They had an abridged winter meetings then. They didn't want, I don't know why they made it this way, but it was at the hotel, the Hilton at the O'Hare. And I went to those meetings and then graduated, and then January 1 went right to San Diego.
Yeah, I love the quote here. It says, in one day, I'm going to go from a very old law student to a very young baseball executive. That was probably one of the few people that got a job before they graduated from law school to go
Yeah, no
play
kidding.
baseball, right?
Yeah, and you know what? My brother said to me, he goes, "All right, how long did you play?" I went 11 years. Okay, you want to be a executive in a major league club in San Diego, California, or do you want to be a 35-year-old first year associate at you know Greenberg Taurig and working 100-hour weeks? And I said, oh, okay, I got you. So that's when I realized I had done the right thing. I often wonder how my career would have been different, but it turned out fine. So I'm not going to look back.
Is there anything that you learned in law school that you feel kind of has really helped you in your post-playing career, in your executive scouting career?
Well, I think two things. People think you're smarter than you really are when you have a law degree. And and the second thing is you learn how to read the English language. It's amazing how many people cannot read English. And and you understand the difference between and or, you know, and you can you have you've learned the discipline of sitting down and reading a very tough document for an hour straight. You've learned that skill if that's got any value. But when I was as a minor league director, everything was boilerplate. Minor league contracts, it's sign here, everybody's got the same rights and obligations, blah blah blah. But when I got to the big leagues and I started dealing with guaranteed contracts, and they have addendums, and I used to get this call from lawyers, letters from lawyers. Hey, I want to work in your legal department with the Cubs. I said, legal department? I am the legal department. That's it, me. And so I have to read through these, and I would work my way through it. I remember there was one agent who was a particular pain in the ass, and he had all these pages, and he didn't think I was going to read it. And I read it, and I said, listen, Jim, I'm not paying your guys if he's in prison, okay, for murder. Oh, he says, oh, you read that part of it, huh? I said, yeah, I did, you know. So to answer your question, just being able to read the English language, realizing everything is, you hear this from lawyers, but it's true. Everything's a different shade of gray. There's no black and white, you know. I think that we tend now, when we're evaluating players or we're evaluating people, it's like one or the other. It's binary. It's either A or B. There's no shades of gray in between, and everything's a shade of gray. And I think you look at it through that telescope, it helps you make the best decision you can make at the time you make it. So I think those are the things that help me.
Yeah, and so you start off with San Diego, you're there for a couple, 3 years, move on to the Mets as the assistant general manager there. And then you get the Cubs job in the middle of the 94-95 strike. So what is it like taking over a general manager's position when you're coming into a season where there may or may not be a season, you may or may not be putting together rosters with replacement players?
Yeah, that was interesting. At the time, I was just thrilled to have the job, and I remember sitting in the office. I got the job October 10th, so October, November, December, I'm sitting in the office, and I was not going to get involved in getting replacement players. I got my minor league director and Scott Nelson, who was the office guy, and I said, hey, you guys, I want you to go find players. They're going to settle this thing. I was absolutely convinced they were going to settle this thing before opening day. I said, go out and try to get the best players you can. We're not going to ask any of the players in our system to cross the line. I wasn't going to do that. I wasn't going to get one of our better young players and say, hey, how'd you like to go to the big leagues right now? You know, I wasn't going to do that because he would have been labeled as a scab the rest of his career. And, you know, I was a player rep for a few years when I was a player and understood. And so I didn't want to subject our guys to that. So, you know, we put together a team that was okay. You know, in spring training, you know, I remember sitting at a meeting, you know, we're going to go over final rosters. Now I'm finally a GM in the big leagues. And Jim Riggleman says, I like Joe Schmo as our setup man. And Joe Schmo, I forget his name. Oh, his name was Joe Housey. Joe Housey was our area scout in South Florida. But he had a good arm. He's a former minor leaguer. He asked if he can come in, and we let him come in and try to make the team. So I'm sitting there thinking, I waited my whole life to get this job, and I got our area scout in South Florida as my setup guy in the big leagues, you know? So luckily they settled the thing. Then we went back to Arizona for a second spring training, and I think we didn't open the season until like April 20th something, you know, in Cincinnati.
And so 95 then, um, Kerry Wood is the Cubs' first round pick. I think he went
That's right.
fourth overall.
That's right.
Of the
I'll tell you a
guys,
funny.
yeah, go ahead.
I'll tell you a funny story about that. We're picking fourth. The Angels were picking first. We all knew they were going to take the punter from the University of Nebraska, Darren Erstad. I saw him punt in the Orange Bowl that year, and this guy could boom putts. He might have been a high pick. Might have been the first punter taken in the NFL, but they took him, and then the Padres took Ben Davis, a catcher out of Philadelphia High School. Now the Seattle Mariners are picking in front of us, and we didn't know who they were going to pick. If they had taken Kerry Wood, we're taking Todd Hilton. So imagine that. And you know, fast forward 15 years, I'm sitting as a scout in Colorado on Todd Hilton Day in Coors Field, and I almost went down to get next to him and say, introduce myself and say, tell him the story. Just how different your life can be by something you had no idea that's going on at the time it's going on. So if they had taken Kerry Wood, we're taking Todd Helton, but they took Jose Cruz Jr. and then we took Kerry.
And of all of the drafts that you kind of had your hand in, who was the one guy that you feel was the most can't miss prospect?
No, it had to be Kerry Wood, no
Yeah.
doubt. Yeah, I mean, he was special. His stuff was like Dwight's in a lot of ways. You know, when I saw him throw live the first time down in Florida after he had signed, you know, he'd throw that fastball that looks like it's going to be in the dirt when you're off to the side looking, and it stays on that plane, bam, and hits lower in the strike zone. And then he had that breaking ball that was just unhittable. So, yeah, Kerry was clearly the best guy we ever drafted.
And so then that next year, 96, we mentioned Rhino and the cancer issues that he's got going on, but he had taken that year off. You were instrumental in bringing him back to the Cubs.
Well, yeah, I really didn't have a choice, frankly. I mean, we wanted him back, and he was coming back. You know, he retired. He wasn't there in '95, and he wanted to spend more time with his family. Then he was coming back, and we all knew he was coming back, and we signed him, and he came back. And then I think he played another year, maybe or two, and then retired for good. But yeah, there was no doubt that we wanted him back. He was like the face of the franchise, and you know, we are in the entertainment industry. And '96 was a tough year. I mean, we played pretty good up until the end, and then we just fell apart. And then '97 was a disaster. So you know, you have ups and downs, and you try to work your way through them.
And what was it like putting together that team for 98? That was a fun team, a fun year.
Yeah, it really was. You know, Sammy, of course, stepped into, you know, the season started off on a bad note. Harry Carey had a stroke and died on Valentine's Day in Palm Springs. So in spring training, flew back to Chicago for the funeral. and then came back and started the year. And, our pitching is, I can't remember exactly, but our pitching staff was good. I had signed Rod Beck as a free agent late. I mean, late in January, and he wound up saving 51 games for us. And we played well. And then Kerry came up, and then Sammy did his thing. And it was an exciting year. Sammy and Mark McGwire, in a lot of ways, those guys, I can't say they saved the game of baseball, but they brought it up a notch in the consciousness of fans. And there was a lot of forgiveness going on. People were really pissed off after that strike. I mean, I remember opening day in 1995. Of course, we sold out because it was opening day. But a lot of the games during that year, we had maybe 15, 18,000 people there, during the week, day game during the week in April and May. And then Sammy started his thing. And then when the summer came, it was packed every night. And it was something else. And the media attention, and, Sammy handled it really well. He loved the attention. Mark McGwire didn't like the attention too much, but Sammy kind of helped him through it. And I was joking with Sharon Panazzo. I remember, I said, remember at the end of the year when we got to the playoffs, we played that 1-game playoff. Then we're down in Atlanta for the first game of the playoffs. There's about 1/10 of the media there that we had all season long. And we're like, boy, we can finally relax now. It's a postseason, And because it was hundreds of writers every game. Sammy had to do a pregame, postgame. It was incredible. And the facilities at Wrigley Field were very tough. So Sharon did a fabulous job. And, that I can say with some certainty for maybe a month or two, Sammy Sosa was the most famous athlete in the world. Usually it's some soccer guy or an F1 driver or somebody like that. But Sammy Sosa, during that period of time, I had executives tell me in the advertising industry, this guy might be the most famous athlete in the world right now. And it was true. And I don't know if it was true or not, but it seemed that way. And he brought that the industry, the team, the city to new heights. And Chicago should be forever grateful to Sam.
Yeah, and so after the 2000 season, you kind of transferred from the front office, you then hit the road as a scout, right? So you're working
Yeah,
for the Cubs
yeah.
doing
Yeah, it was my
scouting.
time. I didn't want to go through. I didn't want to have Andy go through. There's 100 reasons why we were struggling. Some of them were my fault, some weren't. But what are you going to do? And so I left, and I could move anywhere I wanted to. So for me, it was either Tampa or Phoenix because that's where the most baseball is. It's where spring training is. And we had a guy in Tampa, Ken Kravec. So I came out here to Scottsdale and have been here ever since.
And so in working with the Cubs versus the Blue Jays, what was the difference, if any, between the systems or the evaluation processes for those franchises?
Well, it's pretty much standard back then. It was pretty standard. We had the same grading systems. You have the same, uh, you know, language you use, things you do's and don'ts in a report. Try to stay away from using the word if. And if you're evaluating a player, hey, if this guy can hit a breaking ball, this guy can throw strikes, you're supposed to tell him, is he going to? I mean, it's pretty much the same. When I went to Toronto, they had hired a whole bunch of scouts, and Alex Anthopoulos and Perry Manassian and Dana Brown were there. They're all general managers now, and those guys worked hard, and we had a blast. I mean, we had big success. We went to 2 consecutive ALCSs, and then they brought in a new president. He started getting rid of people, so that's when I was let go after the 2016 season. And the industry has gone a different path in terms of analytics. And when you're 60 years old and you're trying to get back into a young man's game, it's tough. And I understand that. I'll be the last guy to complain about it. Did they handle it the right way? Probably not. Do they have the right to do it? Absolutely. When I took over in organizations, I let people go. So for me to complain about it would be kind of hypocritical. So 2016 was my last year in working in Major League Baseball.
Did you consider becoming a 60-year-old first-year associate at a law firm?
Well, I would have to go back and take the bar exam, and that
Oh,
would have been very difficult. Yeah, because when I accepted the job from Joe, I said, Joe, when he offered the job, he says, I need you here January 1. And I said, Joe, man, the bar exam's February 24th and 25th. And he goes, oh, that's going to be a problem. Let me call you back. And so I hung up the phone, picked it back up, said, forget it, I'll take the job. I wasn't gonna lose this opportunity. So I think the Florida bar exam still has my money, I think. That reminds me, I have to write them a letter.
so Dan Evans told me that you and he were able to kind of go observe Shohei Ohtani when he was in America a long time ago. He was still playing for the Fighters at that point. Do you remember getting to see him and seeing what he was like in Arizona?
I do remember. I do remember. And I remember he hit a ball in Peoria straightaway center field, like on a line drive. I thought it was going to hit the batter's eye, and it just kept going. And there was no doubt that his ability, Dan was locked in Japan. That was part of his coverage in Japan. He knew all the people over there. He did a great job over there, and he knew all that. And he was telling me about Ohtani as I'm watching him. But yeah, I do remember seeing him. It was pretty exciting to see a player of that age with that kind of ability. I don't think I saw him. I think I just saw him throw a bullpen, and he wasn't really letting it fly, but he had a good delivery and a loose arm. He was tall. You could tell he could throw hard.
Yeah, so there's a question in the chat about whether you exchange Christmas cards with Keith Moreland. I know you did have a little bit of a dust up at some point, and he charged the mound, but it's
Yeah,
you
well,
guys
the
made
stat.
up and you were later teammates then.
Oh yeah, we got over it.
Yeah.
But the statute of limitations is run, and so I can say yes, I did hit him on purpose. I don't think I'm going to get fined by anybody. But we were just getting beat. We're getting our ass handed to us. It was a doubleheader. Ron Darling pitched the first game in Wrigley Field. No lights, of course. Wind's blowing out. He gets hammered. I think it was one of his worst outings. If you look, it's like I think it's like, is it August 8th, something like that, 1984. There's a doubleheader, and he got hammered. And then I went out and did okay, and then it was like a ground ball error, and then a bloop, and then a home run, and then a bloop double, and I said, "That's enough. That's it." So he came up, I hit him. He came out to the mound, and the amazing thing about that whole thing is, after we got done rolling around on the ground, both teams came out there, piled on, blah blah blah. We all stand up looking for our hats and gloves, and I get on the mound, and I'm facing the next hitter, and I look over, and he's on first base. So neither one of us got thrown out of the game, but it was over with. There was no need. I mean, actually, I was on the bottom of the pile. We're face to face, and I said, "Hey, man, I'm sorry. I had to do something." He goes, "I understand. Thanks for hitting me in the ass, instead of the head, which I had never done anyway." And yeah, so that's we're friends now. I haven't talked to him in a while, but we're still friends, and we both got over it.
Good. You think you're going to have him on as a guest on your podcast at some
Well, I'm
point?
trying to find him is what I'm
Yeah.
trying to do. His nickname was Zonk, and he was a really good hitter. He was a quality major league professional hitter. The way they're teaching hitting now, he would never have done. The way they're teaching hitting now is wrong, and it shows up, and that's why the commissioner's having such a hard time with offense. I mean, the commissioner's done his great job. I call it the shot clock, the pitch clock might have saved the game. I mean, the last year before the pitch clock came in, these games were becoming unwatchable, and so I think they're struggling for offense, but they're successful in what they're teaching. You know, you can't expect hitters to do something that, number one, they're not teaching them to do, and number two, the reward system tells them not to do it. So the reward system is there. They're teaching guys to batting average doesn't mean anything. It's all about hitting the ball in the air, slugging. Strikeouts don't matter. So now you've got a system where you had 7 300 hitters in the big leagues this past year. 7. In 1990, there were 22. But you got home runs, 23 guys hit 30 or more home runs. You had 90 guys hit 20 or more home runs. And then the biggest thing, based on 1990, 46 guys in the big leagues punched out 150 or more times this year. In 1990, it was 6. And I go back to 1990 just because it's, to flush that all that steroid era, just get back to what it was before, the guys started getting big and stronger and stronger and stronger and trying to hit home runs every at bat. So I think the commissioner wants to go back to that style of play because things were happening all the time. And, you had, when's the last time you saw a hit and run in a game? Well, now with the DH, universal DH, you're never going to see a sack bunt anymore until you get to the postseason. Then they ask somebody to do it. They haven't asked them all year to do it. And then he doesn't get it down and they boo the hell out of him. That's just the nature of the game. So the reward system, it's working. I mean, they're getting what they're teaching, and they're just teaching the wrong thing. So don't expect players to do what the player development and the coaches in the big leagues are teaching guys to do. They're not teaching them to do the things the commissioner wants to happen in baseball. It's just not happening.
So in terms of the podcast, what is it about podcasting that appealed to you? What was the impetus to start it?
Well, because I like to talk, and I'm thinking, what's the one thing I'm an expert at, and it's baseball, and it's more of a hobby. I'd like to get it going a little more now. I feel comfortable doing it. I think we can talk about some of the issues that are important. Try to be as honest as I can. I don't have people on that are working for clubs now. I don't want to put them in a position to criticize their own club. They're just not going to do it anyway. So I try to get guys that are older and that are retired, and we can talk about things. And I'm kind of a quasi partnership with Bob Nightingale in this thing, and I just like the fact that I can go out there and tell my opinion, based on the truth that I learned in my 40 years. And so I enjoy it. And so we'll keep going with it.
Yeah, so I think one of your recent guests on the call, Jacob Pomranke, you guys talked about the Black Sox.
Yes, that was a really interesting show. I think it was the one where he got a transcript of the civil trial. No, he got a transcript in the civil trial when Joe Jackson was suing Comiskey for his back pay that he didn't pay him because he was unjustly thrown out of baseball. And they had the transcript from the criminal trial where it basically said under oath, yeah, I took money. Yeah, I took money to lose games in the World Series. And the jury, they didn't matter. There's no jury in Chicago that's going to convict shoeless Joe Jackson in September of 1920 for throwing baseball games. He was a god then. So they go to the correct. I'm just paraphrasing here, and they go to the civil trial, and the judge in the civil trial has got a copy of the transcript from the criminal trial, and he's like, "This is ridiculous. You said right here that you took money to throw the games. I don't care if you were acquitted or not. You're guilty." And he threw the case out. So I always thought Joe might have been innocent, but then that opened my eyes when they sent me the book. It weighed about 12 pounds. It was a transcript from the criminal trial, and it was very interesting stuff. It was really, really good stuff. And I'm sure as Chicago SABR guys, you guys probably love that stuff too, like I did.
Oh, I had to lug that book around a convention for a while, so I know exactly how that goes. But if anybody out there wants to take a look or listen, it's just surfingbaseball.com, and you can find all of your episodes there. Obviously, with your connections, Ed, you get some high profile guests, some interesting conversations. I listened to the one with Jim Riggleman. It was a lot of really interesting stuff about your time together with the
Yeah.
Cubs.
Yeah, you know, I wanted to interview like scouts. I had two area guys that scouted for years, and you know, what's it like when you go into a parent's home and you know, the kids home with the parents, and you know, telling stories like that. And one thing, you can't lie to a player, and because you know, you don't see a lot of that, you know, and nobody really has the experience of going in and trying to sell an organization to a family in very, you know, pretty emotional circumstances, you know. I mean, it's your child you're talking about. And so we talk about some of the mistakes that scouts make, you know, like the guy that wants to be popular with the parents goes in and says, "I like your son in the third round," and say he's with Cleveland. Now he doesn't, he gets drafted in the eighth round by the Tigers, and the Tiger guy goes in there and he's going to offer him eighth round money. And the mother says, "Well, we were told he's a third rounder." Well, who told you that? Well, the guy from Cleveland. Well, did Cleveland take him in the third round? No, we took him. We like him more than Cleveland liked him. But they said, nope. I was told he's a third rounder, so we want third round money. It happens all the time, all the time. So I try to get people like that on, and had Pete Rose on, God rest his soul. You know, I've changed my opinion on Pete and getting into the Hall of Fame, because it's something the commissioner said. I don't know if you guys saw this. The commissioner was talking about Pete going in the Hall of Fame. Now, the Hall of Fame people might disagree with this, but I thought it was interesting what the commissioner, he said, "Do I want Pete Rose working with young players? No. Do I want him managing a major league team? No. But the Hall of Fame is a museum. It's to celebrate the individuals, the characters, the players, and what they meant to this game. It's a museum to honor these guys." And I thought that was great. So that's my line I use now to justify it. Yeah, put him in there. It's a museum. You know, you're not sanctioning what he did. You know, you're putting him in a museum because his career was unbelievable. You know, do a deep dive into his numbers sometime, guys. It's ridiculous. This guy missed 10 games in the decade of the 70s. You know, I think Stanton missed 10 games in the month of July this year. You know, I mean, the guy was a machine, and you know, all the things that serve you well on the street, you know, humility, self-examination, accountability, those things might work against you on the field of play. You know, I mean, certainly this guy he was an uber confident guy. He believed in his ability. He wasn't humble. And if you got him out, it had to be the ump's fault. It's just the way great players, great talents think, you know. So I thought that was an interesting conversation, and then he passed away. But we were talking about Ohtani. I want to say something about Ohtani. If Ohtani asked me what he should do going forward, I would tell him, don't ever go on that mound again, ever. And if he asks why, I'll say, how many Tommy Johns have you had? He'll say 2. Okay, now, if you get a third Tommy John, you'll hurt your arm again. Not only are you going to miss another year, but do you think the mechanics of your swing are going to be maybe different with a third traumatic invasion of your elbow? It might ruin your swing. And then the last thing I'll say is to people, who do you compare him to? Oh, Babe Ruth. Well, the Yankees had a choice when he left Boston and come to New York, and they made him a position player. I'll say, how did that work out for the Yankees? Pretty good. You know, I would never let him on that mound again, but he says he wants to pitch. So I'd be doing everything I can at the Dodgers to convince him that you don't want to pitch anymore. We don't want you to pitch. Can he force himself? Yeah, if he says I'm pitching, they're going to have to let him pitch. But I wouldn't. If I was him, I wouldn't. I would make sure I'd play right field or DH and take care of your arm and go out and do 60-60 next year. You know, I mean, this guy, he had a pretty good year this year. I'll tell you what, he had a year to remember this year, and he didn't pitch. So he can do what he did, and he can win a Gold Glove in right field. You know, they got Freddie Freeman at first base, but I mean, this guy is a superior athlete. You know, fastest guy on the team. He's going to have plus range in the outfield. You know, he's going to throw now and then, which is okay. So that's what I would do with Ohtani.
Well, let me ask you this: I think that we could probably sit here and talk baseball all night. I don't want to keep you here, but do you have a couple minutes to answer some questions if
Absolutely.
anybody has them? Oh,
Absolutely.
great. I'm going to stop sharing. And if we could just maybe, if you've got a question, go down and hit the um, raise hand button, wherever it is at the bottom.
Just don't ask me about double A shortstops in the Cubs organization, please.
Looks like Matthew Glynn's got his hand raised.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Ed. I appreciate the range of stuff you've covered tonight. You did, in passing, you mentioned your service time, which I believe was, did you say 11 years in the majors?
No, no, not 11 years.
Not
11 years professionally. Yeah, I had 6
Professionally,
years,
okay.
132 days in the big league.
Could you
Yeah,
speak?
I had probably
Mhm.
4 years in the minor leagues, right in
Mhm.
that. So just short of 11, I think.
Was it at the same time that 10 service years made a big difference in terms of your post game, like being able to earn a pension and so forth? Was that just as true
Yeah,
now?
but you know what? If you get 9 years, you get 9/10 of the pension. If you get 9.5 years, you get 9.5 tenths of the pension. So I get basically 7/10 of the pension.
Mhm.
And this now I know, hey, it was always an accomplishment, but we didn't now, with I never knew what other guys' service time was down to a day. But now when a guy gets his 10th year, what happens is your rookie year, halfway through your rookie year, you're 0 plus, 172 days in a season. So you're 0 plus 80, and then 81, 82. And at the end of the year, you got 0 plus 171 days, and then the next day is 172. Now you're 1 plus 0. Now you go to your second year, you're 1 plus 1, all the way up, and that's how that works. So you might be a 10-year major leaguer now on April 14th, because of the days, and so that's they make a big deal out of that, and they should. They should. I don't think there's anything harder in sports than to be in baseball, football, because you get beat up pretty bad. But to be a 10-year position player in the major leagues is very tough, because everybody's got one left fielder, one center fielder, one right fielder, one shortstop. Pitching's different. You got 12 or 13 or 14 on a team. You can kind of like hide out in that bullpen for a while, but if you're an everyday player for 10 years in the big leagues, you're some kind of player. You're some kind of skilled athlete.
Bill Perch, you had a question?
Yeah, I did. I was just kind of curious, somebody that you would have known as a teammate and as well when you moved to the executive role. Do you have any Sean Dunston stories you'd like to share?
Yeah. Shawan, don't call me Shawan. His rookie, everybody had all young players had a nickname. His nickname was Bus Stop. This Lee Smith gave everybody a nickname. And I guess his first day in the big leagues, he made the team out of spring training. He's heading to the park for opening day in Wrigley Field. And he runs into a bus in his car, a city bus. So, but I can tell you one thing about Sean Dunston. No one played harder. No one played with intensity every inning of every game I ever saw this guy play. You never saw him jogging down the first. It was funny. He used to hit the ball and then flip his bat and it go up in the air towards the mound. So his bat would wind up halfway to the mound. And he was running like crazy. And the other thing is, I've never seen a position player with a better arm than Sean Dunston. This guy could throw. I remember being on the mound, there'd be a high chopper over my head. And here he comes from shortstop and he scoops the ball and he's going towards first. And Leon Durham's over there going, oh God, here it comes. And he would throw 180 miles an hour. When you're a kid, that ball that it's right in between catching it hands up and hand, palm up or palm down. It's right in that gray area. And he's trying to, so Sean was a really, really good player and a great teammate. Good person, good family man, and played hard every single day.
So, David Malamut.
Hello. You came up with Greg Maddux making his debut. What was the difference in Maddux then compared to what we all saw later in his career.
Yeah, when he came up, it's a really good question. When I'll tell you what, this is before ESPN and the internet. We had heard about this kid in AAA. He's 10-1, and he's coming up to the big leagues. So we're all standing around, me, Lee Smith, Rick Sutcliffe. We're all about 8 feet tall, and all of a sudden, here comes a clubhouse kid. We assumed he was from the visiting clubhouse. He's got Maddox's bag and he goes over to the locker. He puts it down. Now we're looking at the staircase. Well, where's Maddox? All of a sudden, this kid is unpacking his stuff. He starts putting his uniform on. We're like, hey, what are you doing? Hey, I'm Greg Maddox. So his nickname was Bat Boy. He looked like he was 12 years old. But I'll tell you what, when he went out on that mound in 86, when he came up, it was hard gas. On the guns back then, it was probably 93, 94. With a hard breaking ball that he couldn't command. And so look at his numbers in 86 and 87 when I was with him. I think he had a 5 ERA 1 year, might have been close to 5 at 87, was 5-11. So I retire, I go home to law school. My first year in law school, I didn't watch baseball much. And now it's like the summer after my first full year, it's 1989. And the game of the week's on, and it's Maddox. And I see he's like 10-2 with a 1.6. I'm like, what the hell? And I look out there and he's just going, his ball's moving all over the place, but he's painting with it. He's hitting the spots. Had a cut fastball, had a sinker he could throw on the third base side of the arm side of the plate. He had the sinker he could throw at the front hip of the left-handed hitter and freeze him. He had a slurve he could throw to right-handers. He had impeccable command. Ball moved all over the place. They couldn't hit him. And I was like, wow. And so to your question, was it Ed that asked that? No, David. David, to your question, that's a great question because he went from hard or hardest to, off speed. Now he could, on the gun back then, I remember in 1995, my first year as GM, I sat behind home plate. I had a radar gun because I didn't trust the guns in the ballpark. And so I had the radar gun on him. And I'm the GM, and I'm sitting there, with a radar gun. I'm probably like an idiot. But the hardest pitch he threw in that game was like 91 miles an hour. Vast majority of them were 80, 89, couple at 90, couple at 91. So he's throwing 89 miles an hour. Ball's moving all over the place. He's got a cutter. He's got a sinker. He's got a slurve. He's got a changeup that's really good. And he could throw wherever he wanted at any count, any time. And that's what made him great. It wasn't the stuff. It was the stuff, but it wasn't like, I bet his spin rate wasn't that real good. It wasn't like a sharp breaking ball. His velocity wasn't that good, in terms of now. But he would be successful now. If he pitched now, he'd probably be more successful because the hitters have no approach whatsoever. You can't tell if it's 0-2 or 2-0. You can't tell what the situation is. You can't tell if the bases are loaded. You can't tell if there's nobody on. You can't tell where they're hitting in the lineup. Everybody's got the same approach. So I think he would be even more dominant now.
I don't see anybody else with a hand up. Is there anybody else that has a question, wants to hop in? Unless I'm just missing you.
Yeah, I
just raised my hand.
Okay, Nicholas, why don't you go ahead?
I was gonna ask because I realized recently I was like, there's the two names are strikingly similar, and that is Sid Finch and Ed Lynch. Where yeah, and you, of course, during that time, were you in on that story? And,
oh yeah, I was there. Oh yeah. Yeah, Jay Horwitz, I think it was in 84. Jay Horwitz had this idea on April Fool's Day that the Mets signed this guy out of the Himalayan mountains. And the guy looked like, I brought his name up earlier, Ichabod Crane. He looked like a librarian. And he had boots on. He actually came to spring training on April 1st. I think it was April 83, maybe 84, I forget. And they said he threw 120 miles an hour. And he's unhittable. And some of these writers actually went there thinking that this was real. And one writer's like, hey, man, this is going to be awesome. I said, what's today? He goes, April 1st. I go, what is that? He goes, April Fool's. Oh, no. I said, yeah, it's a joke. Sid Finch. I haven't heard that name in a while. I don't think it was named after Ed Lynch, but I wish I had Sid's stuff. I'll tell you that.
And pitch without shoes?
Yeah.
right? Mike Malley's got a question.
Hey, Ed, this has been great. Thank you very much.
Sure.
I was reviewing some stats, of course, SABR guy, and clutch hitting is a metric now that people look at. And one of the best Cubs of all time with clutch hitting was Mark Grace. Could you tell us a story about Mark Grace and your time with him?
Yeah, I'll tell you, Mark was something else, man. And you know, I just missed him as a player. He came up, I left after 87. He came up in 88. And he's a perfect example of the hitting approach that hitters were taught coming up. You know, I don't think Mark was a lot like Keith Hernandez. You know, I don't think Mark ever hit 20 home runs. I don't think he ever drove in 100 runs. You guys can check that for me. But he was clearly like
right.
the best player, best hitter, pure hitter on the team. And, you know, in 1995, we played 144 games and he had 50 doubles in 144 games. And Jim Riggleman had somebody got on Mark about not hitting home runs. And Jim Riggleman said, you know what, if you can drive in runs from first base, that's pretty good too, you know. And there's a certain value to hitting doubles. You know, home runs are great, Yahoo, blah, blah, blah. But if you're trying to hit home runs and you're striking out versus staying level, keeping your bat in the strike zone, playing to the percentages, playing to the situation, and you're hitting doubles in the gap, you're going to drive in a lot of runs, you know. Yeah, Mark was, and he was off the charts defensively. Now, he wore number 17. Somebody said it was because of Keith Hernandez. I asked Mark about it this summer, and he said, not really, but yeah, okay, I'll say yeah, you know. But they were very similar players, very similar. And, you know, Keith won an MVP and won batting title. I don't think Mark ever won a batting title, but he was a great player and funny as hell. Great personality. He was a sports nut. I mean, after the game, we played all day games, you know, mostly day games when I was GM. And he'd go in there and he'd sit in the clubhouse and he'd watch like 3 laps of Sports Center, you know, 3 times around, watching the same show 3 times. I'm like, how do you do that? He goes, well, I missed, like, you know, the WNBA scores for a second time, you know. But he loves sports and he's a good friend of mine. I see him all the time here and a great player.
Looks like Matthew Glidden's got another question.
Yeah, I chatted with one of the trainers from those early 80s Mets years earlier this year, and he had a lot of great things to say about Torrey and Bamberger. I was wondering if you had any.
Oh, yeah. Was it Larry Mayall? Did you talk to Larry Mayall? Is that the name?
I talked to the trainer, let's see, Paul Weiner.
Oh, I remember that name.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Bamberger was great, man. He was the best pitching coach I ever had, even though he was the manager. He taught me a lot of stuff, man. He taught me the slide step. He taught me, you know, pitching situations. Always positive. I threw a complete game in spring training when he was the manager in a B game. You know, and he was big believer on throw. Keep throwing. You know, throw a lot. But we didn't throw max effort. You know, we just try to stay under control and hit our spots. You know, we still gave it, you know, effort, major league effort, but it wasn't like head snapping, snot flying. We don't care where the ball's going as long as we hit a certain miles per hour kind of delivery, you know. And Bambi was great, you know. And who was the other one?
Joe Torre. Yeah, he said
Joe.
those were the 2 his favorite managers to work with.
Yeah, Joe was tough. You know, when I came up, Joe was still a young manager, and we had a bad club. And you know, he went from being a player to being the manager. Tuesday's a player, Wednesday's a manager. So that was 77. So he's 78, 79, 80. He's, you know, I came up, he's in his, you know, 3rd full year, 3.5 years. So, and he never had a good team. So he was frustrated. And he was tough, but he was good. He helped me a lot, you know, in terms of, like I said earlier, you know, go out there, throw fastballs low and away till you got to throw something else. And sometimes the best advice you get as a pitcher is from a hitter. So, yeah, I love Joe. I see Joe now to this day. I see him. We have lunch now and then here, and I guess he's getting up there. So I'm sure he'll be retiring soon. But you know, Hall of Fame manager. You know, Hall of Famer. Can't take that away from him ever.
All right, looks like we've got time for one last question. Another one from David Malamud. Go ahead.
So again, Ed, what prospect as a GM do you most regret trading away or missing
Well,
out?
this will make you guys happy. The one I traded to the White Sox for, oh shit, what's his name?
On Garland?
Oh, you had to say it, didn't you? Yeah, yeah. We needed a relief pitcher, and I traded John Garland to the White Sox for a right-handed reliever.
Matt
And
Karchner.
Matt Karchner. Yep, Matt Karchner. That was the bad trade I made. And but you know, we needed a reliever, and John was very young. I hadn't seen him, and he was an A-ball. I hadn't seen him yet. I'm looking at the reports, and you know, they said he's going to be okay. He's still young. He's an A-ball. You know, we got a chance to win. My manager's telling me we need a reliever. Matt Karchner was available, so I made the trade. You know, so things happen, and John went on to have a really good career, and I'm happy for him. So yeah, that was a big regret that I have trading a prospect.
All right. Well, on that high note, why don't we why don't we
Yeah,
end things?
thanks.
Ed, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for
Sure,
spending the
anytime.
time with us tonight, answering questions and talking about baseball. If at any point anybody again wants to check out Ed's podcast, you could find it at surfandbaseball.com. And hopefully you'll continue getting great guests. And if you're interested in this recording to ever watch again yourself, it should be up on the internet in a couple of days. But thank you so much again. This was
Okay, guys,
so much
anytime.
fun.
Thanks so much.
All right, take care.
Great. Thank you.